A Tale of Two Hygienists presents this week's TIPisode, quick and easy tips to keep you up to date and presented by the experts in the profession. Now, get ready for your unofficial TIPisode. So y'all, we're back with a TIPisode. Andrew and I don't do this super often, but we are really excited about a lot of products that are coming out from all of this craziness right now and the pandemic and the shutdown. And we thought we'd kind of tell you some of the things that we are finding pretty interesting. This is not an all-encompassing, list.
Yeah.
All-inclusive, maybe. Yeah, it's not. This is just the things that we've seen. And today we're going to start with high volume evacuation or extraoral evacuation. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the funny thing about all of this is like we've been talking about this for years and years and years. And on the back of this pandemic, now we're finally going to be able to, I hope, to be able to do the right thing finally by our patients, by us, by the other people in the room, family members, or whatever. So this is really exciting for me to talk about.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of airflow for years now. I've always been a user of, back in the day, the ProfiJet. And then once, I got other options for powder, I kind of migrated to airflow. But you know what? It creates a ton of aerosols. And you know what the one moment, because we're going to talk face shields and masks and all this stuff later on. But the one time where I was like, I think I need to get a better handle on my aerosols is because, well, one, I was wearing the wrong mask, but I could taste the mintiness of the powder.
Gross.
And I was like, it was super gross. And, I was using glycine. Glycine's a little bit of a smaller powder. I wasn't even using, when I went to go look at the box, and this is where, now I'm like obsessed with mask and stuff. But before, I didn't know the level of the mask, and I didn't even realize that it was a box of masks that wasn't rated by ASTM or ATMS. I always get those confused. But anyway, we're not going to go down mask. But that was when I was like, oh, well, one, I got to get ahead of this on the mask side. But maybe I need to embrace my high volume evacuation. And then Washington, tell me about Washington and high volume.
Well, it's funny because for years they've been trying to also pass this into legislation that it's mandatory for any procedure that creates any sort of aerosol or splatter is supposed to be using a high volume evacuation. Now, it hasn't actually made it into the rules yet, but I think this is going to push it right in really quick. It was already going to be on the cusp. Like we've been talking about it for years. And it had got to the point of like this might be the year to do it.
It's time.
It is time. And so one thing I want to kind of like pivot towards a little bit, and hopefully you can answer this because you're pretty good at all of this information, is as we're talking today about the suction units, there's different reasons to use different ones. So for example, the Blue Boa versus the Isolite versus the high volume evacuation. And so there's like droplets and aerosols and there's water reduction and there's all these different reasons to have different tools. Can you talk a little bit more about that though? Because I feel like people just think that we're just trying to pull water out of people's mouths.
I think I said on the phone with you the other day, I was like, well, that product looks great if I was only worried about aerosols. But right. I am drowning the patient in addition to it, and it doesn't get all of the pooling water in the back. And, I've been testing a lot of different high volumes. It's probably been a strong year and a half, and I got all kinds. I've got Mr. Thirsty. I have Isolite. I have Isovac. I have Purevac. I have the regular one with a Cordeze. I have ReLeaf. I have, I'm trying to think. I feel like there's one more.
Have you tried the New Bird yet?
That's on my list. I want to try it. But I just haven't, bit the bullet and paid for it. And because I was trying all these other ones, and I'm trying to think, there's a few more out there. And then I realized that at the end of the day, I have not found one that works for everything.
Right.
It doesn't work for every procedure. It doesn't work for every patient. And it doesn't work for every clinician because, there's one other hygienist that will volunteer with me sometimes. And she's like, I just can't get this to work. And I'm like, I get it. And like, it's not for everyone. So I don't, not anything specific, but just whatever she was trying. And I have been begging the world to find something for, mainly as hygienists because we're in there doing it by ourselves a lot of times. that can control the aerosols and also not drown the patient at the same time, but
Right.
without having 47 parts. Because at this point, what I do, my two setups are either Isolite or Isovac, depending on the room I'm in. That's going to get all the pooling water for me. And it actually does a really good job of aerosols when I'm in the posterior of the mouth. But if I'm using airflow and I'm blasting from lingual to facial in the anterior, I'm like, I can't even, I'm just asking it to do something it just can't manage, right?
Sure.
So then I have to have a second high volume evacuation to grab all of those. So I'm like, okay, there's two things that I have to have now. And not everybody has two high volumes in their operatories. I'm lucky that I do. And so if I'm not using that particular system, then I am using something like, maybe a combo. I'm always using a high volume evacuator, but because I can't stay on top of the pooling water and the splatter and spray and all the stuff happening in the back of the mouth, and I'm trying to either focus on one or the aerosols, I have to have that low volume. So I did do ReLeaf. ReLeaf was good, but that's also two high volume evacuations I was going to have. So then if you don't have that, that's a problem. And then I ended up with pink Petal on a saliva ejector with a backflow preventer. And then my Cordeze which is a bracelet to take the drag off my high volume, which is, oh my God, it's like night and day. It's
I
like
think
barely
that
have
we
anything in
agree
my
with,
hand.
like, we're not really necessarily going to recommend all of these products for everyone,
Yeah.
but Cordeze is something you and I both believe in as far as if you are having any sort of fatigue or any sort of pull on it like that, it just works. There's just no getting around it. It works 100% of the time.
Yeah, it's it's so funny because when I first started high volume, do you do high volume pretty routinely by yourself? By yourself?
Yeah.
I've slapped the patient in the face probably a dozen times. Like, if I don't, I'm so bad with it.
I learned it in
Because I'm
school though,
focused.
from school
and
I've used it regularly. So
I didn't.
It wasn't a weird thing.
And I have always retracted with my suction because, again, from day one graduating, going into perio, my flow was ProfiJet, Cavitron, hand scale. Boom, boom, boom. I've never done it any other way. And so everybody got like blasted with water. And so I've taken my low volume and I've used it as a retraction tool. So but that's horrible ergonomics because I got rid of like my mirror and then I was doing a lot of like turn your head all the way over to the other side and putting my head at a weird angle to see some areas. And so none of it's been good for me. I can't find, but this is also a good time where if you guys have something, like tell us, like I will try it because I need a solution.
Right.
But anywho, point of it, Cordeze is great because I wasn't slapping my patients in the face with the tube because it was coming across, and I was like trying to, I didn't know how to use it, and I still am not great at it mostly because I didn't learn because I got Cordeze and problem solved.
So should we run through some products just generally and what they're for? So obviously number one on the list is Cordeze. That was the one for me for all of these things. But let's talk about like Isolite, Mr. Thirsty, and all of those. So I know we've talked about them on the podcast before. So if you guys haven't listened to our full episodes, we've talked about them multiple times. But these ones are going to be more for the pooling of water, and in my opinion, and you're again the expert on infection control out of the two of us at least.
Yeah, out of the two of us.
If we're working, so you think about the Isolite, right? So if we're working on a patient who has some sort of a respiratory issue and they're exhaling through their mouth, my thought is it's going to capture a lot of that. Not all of it. It's going to capture a lot of that because it's a constant vacuum and it's occluding the back. True or false?
True.
Fix me on these things.
Well, of course I don't know. Like, I would be very curious how much breathing they're doing through their mouth. Probably occasional when they can't take good breaths with their nose and they might try to get some in with their mouth, but it does occlude, and it's quite nice because it blocks the airway. So if you did drop anything in a procedure or something like that, that would grab it. And it's a bite block too.
Right.
So patients find it super comfortable. Now,
it retracts the cheek and the tongue.
It retracts the cheek, the tongue. And I will say though, and you can confirm because you used it more than I did years ago, and then I just within the year got it. You have to change your sequence a little bit if you're doing full mouth, right? Like, if we're doing full mouth periomanas or whatever it is, you have to change your sequence, and you might have to change your grip. And this is something they actually teach. They teach it in their training. So, which I'm really glad. So the thing about Isolite, which I enjoyed, is that they went through a whole training session with me, and they were like, you're going to have to modify your grip just a little bit depending on where you are in the mouth. So if you're trying to get that like next to the tooth fulcrum on number 13, 14, it just ain't going to happen.
I see
so you
what
got to, you just got to change it.
Yeah. I mean, it's nothing significant. Like your modified pen grasp isn't going to be like, it's not going to be like you're going to be using just now 2 fingers to get this thing done. It's just a very slight manipulations.
Come back on the whatever you're using, right? Come back on towards the cord of it.
Yeah, for sure.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So where are you at? Like set 11 minutes. So what else do you want to talk about?
I think I want to talk about, so that is good for, again, pooling water and things like that. You can have a blue boa does a good job of like kind of sitting on the side of the cheek, getting some of that pooled water as well. Then the other thing that we have to look at is when we're creating these aerosols and creating these droplets, what do we use for that particular procedure? Because it's, the Isolite's great, but like you mentioned earlier, like if you are spraying right on the facials of 8 and 9, like it's just going to bounce off and get into everywhere. So if you don't want to use that high volume evac right there also, like what else is out there that we could use?
So, well, there's the thing that's going around a lot are the extraoral high volume evacuation systems. And it's like a unit, like you push up to the patient and it's got a cone that sits right at their face. I keep joking that all of the holistic dentists that did these like safer removal of mercury, and everybody gave them a hard time with all of their devices and PPE. They're going to be the real winners of all of this. They are set up like champions for anything. So
I honestly think that they actually developed COVID, put it in Wuhan, and then did all this just so that they get more business. That's my conspiracy theory.
Conspiracy theory by Andrew. But they got a lot of good products that we might want to imitate. And so that is one that you actually do see in a holistic dentist. Aflexx Assist is, which we can put that in the show notes because I misspell it every time, but it's AFLEXX assistarm.com. And so it was something that like was for low volume, so you didn't have to fish hook the patient. But now she came out with new tubing for your high volume, so it's not so heavy. And then she also came out with a cone that's going to be autoclavable, so it's going to be essentially that extraoral, but it's coming from yours. And she's doing a lot of research because some of the questions I had was like, well, what is that? Does it drain your evacuation system, like the whole system? Like if I run it and you're running it and the doctor's running it, can your vacuum system hold up to that? So there's just a lot of things that they're going to still have to, figure out. But I was like, what a cool device. I'm super excited for it. Yeah,
for sure. Similarly, another extraoral one that we ran across is from ADS Dental Systems. It's called Extraoral Dental Suction System. Its byline is Droplets and Aerosols Terminator. And it's the same thing. It's just like it's this cone that it opens up a little bit more as it goes towards the mouth, almost like a funnel, where it's wider, then it gets a little bit more narrow, and then the whole cone is just like your tube head for your X-ray machine, like that kind of cylinder that you're looking at. And this is also a different unit that you'd push up as well. There are some filters and things like that in the bottom of it, and it's just really, again, if you guys have never ever paid attention to our show notes, this is the TIPisode to start paying attention to show notes. We'll have links to all of this stuff in there. So.
And just remember, everyone, that your personal protective equipment is the last barrier, and it's the least effective. What really matters, and this is according to NIOSH and CDC, that you eliminate the risk of exposure, you substitute if you can during a risk of exposure, you have engineering controls, and that's where high volume evacuation falls in. So it is one of the better controls to reduce your risk. So it's essentially a device that's created that either removes the risk or puts a barrier between you and your risk. Like your sharps containers considered a engineering control. Your needle devices, recapping devices. Thank you. Those are all engineering controls, super important. And then you have work practice controls, meaning you got to do it. You got to use it. You got to be trained on it. And then your PPE comes out. So these engineering controls are going to be super important. We've put a lot of weight on that PPE and asked it to carry a burden that it was never meant to carry. And I think we need to just reassess and get innovative and get creative and also curious about some of these products. And remember, not one's going to work for every single person, and you got to train on it. And training to competency is going to be a huge part of it.
That was a great wrap up.
Perfect. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us for this TIPisode. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we love reviews.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, y'all. We hope you enjoyed this week's TIPisode. Be sure to reach out to our guest experts and let them know how helpful their tips were. Follow A Tale of Two Hygienists on Facebook, Instagram, and head over to ataleoftwohygienist.com and subscribe to our newsletter. You can also email us at ataleoftwohygienist@gmail.com and keep listening for more awesome content from your unofficial dental hygiene podcast.